Hi, Gary. How are you?
Hey, Joanna, how you doing?
Good.
Huh, I
Good.
can't see you.
Good. Good to see you guys.
The dream team here. I'm not letting anybody in yet.
How's it going?
Good. Nice shirt.
Thanks. I figured I should wear something DEA, and
Or
unfortunately,
mine.
it's t-shirts and like triple XL polos. So I figured I'd
Oh,
I
probably.
got a cool one. I got to send it to you from Operation Prevention, but it has like, I don't know what it has to do with Operation Prevention because it has a big picture of a big guy with a gun.
That's so.
No, I'm not gonna wear it, but
sounds like just a bad operation, right?
I don't know. I don't know what's weird when they give us polos. It's so strange. Like I have one that's tactical something polo.
okay.
It says DEA on it, but like I said, it's like a triple XL.
Yeah.
And then we have the 360 ones that they gave us the men's sizes.
Whatever.
What can you do? I have my handy dandy notebook for when I eventually will need it.
You mean today?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know there was something else. Sorry. No, I got all kinds of shit all over.
I have 2 pages left in my notebook from, let's see, when did I get this? 521.
From 521. Mine is from 326. But my other was in the office.
Oh, well, actually, shit, we're recording.
And then what?
But we're recording right now?
Yeah, I didn't
Oh,
realize.
we are.
That. I should pause it. So here we are. All right. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming. This is I'm going to get on the screen right now and share my screen with you guys. But this is unprecedented. We don't know of anywhere that something like this is being done. It's actually an interesting. To be a little philosophical, it's like lemonade out of lemons. We're in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and we had a peer-to-peer program going on with actually some of the people that are on the screen here, and we couldn't see each other, and we couldn't get together, and we couldn't, like everybody. So I started thinking, like, what's the best thing? Well, actually, how can we get the message out? And it just made sense to evolve what we were already doing into an online program. That way we can get to everybody. And so I think when we start talking, you'll understand the philosophy behind this and actually why we're doing this. So let me begin. Oh, actually, let me not begin. All right. Sorry. All right, so share screen.
And just so you guys know, this is the first time we've ever done anything like this. So at some points it might be a little bumpy. We just need you guys to hang on to the ride. Bear with us.
Yeah.
Never done it.
Okay. All right. So can everybody see the presentation? Do you see the colorful picture there? Yeah. Kaylin, can you see it?
I can see it, Gary.
Okay. All right. So guys, I'm going to begin. Once again, those who were here a couple minutes ago, I introduced Kaylin and Joanna from the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we want to thank you for doing this. Once again, this is unprecedented. We don't know of anybody that's ever done anything like this. This was done based off circumstance too. So we thank you for doing this. This wasn't easy. I had a power outage. I tried to get a hold of you guys, and we tried to qualify everybody, and we got it done. So I wanted to thank you guys for your flexibility. It really was quite impressive. I enjoyed doing the Zoom questionnaires with you guys to get to know you a little bit. And it wasn't easy doing that. It wasn't easy getting together, but you guys you're very good, and I appreciate that. So why are we here? We are here. Hopefully I can get this. We are here because the opioid epidemic is out of control. It's the biggest drug epidemic in the United States history. more people die each year from opioid overdoses than from car accidents. That's hard to get your head around, but yes, and people don't talk about it that much. This is a man-made disaster. You guys will see from some of the stuff that we give you, this was actually done by man. We created this. And so since we created it, we have to clean it up. And the only way to clean it up is to actually to educate people and have that education make a change. So just to show you one statistic, this is from 1999 to 2018, and you can see the number of people that died from opioids has gone up dramatically. In 2018, it was at 67,000. So you'll see that those are big numbers. So if you think about what's going on with the coronavirus, just to give you some perspective, in the last 3 years, more people have died of opioid overdoses than have died from the coronavirus. And we shut the whole country down for that, and are continuing to do that. So just keep the scale of this in perspective. And so what do we want to do? Well, we were talking about it, and it's like, there's an expression like, what's your moonshot? And John Kennedy we choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. What we're trying to do is very difficult, but it's worthy, and it's noble, and it's actually doable. We think the way that we come about doing this it makes it actually doable. So what do we want to do? What's our goal? Our goal is to educate every high school student in the United States. 3 things about opioids. What is an opioid? One pill can kill you, and what the Good Samaritan law is. We feel that if every student in the United States knew those 3 things, that we could save a lot of lives, we could save a lot of families, we could save a lot of heartache, and people could fulfill their future. We're going to add one more thing onto those 3 things. And so what an opioid is, one pill can kill, and the Good Samaritan law, and we call it 3+1, the importance of credible sources. You guys will hear that the opioid epidemic was actually created based on false information. It's hard to believe that it was this billion-dollar epidemic, in fact, trillions of dollars epidemic, was created based off false information. So how do we take that false information? What are we responsible? How responsible are we? Sorry, I'm just letting somebody in here. Okay. So since nobody's ever done anything like this before, you guys are pioneers. I mean, you got to think of yourself as pioneers. We're doing something new. It's not going to be beautiful. It's not going to be pretty, but we're all pioneers. And pioneers, most of the time, they don't take the straight line to anything. It takes a little bit to go around this and around that, but we'll eventually get to our destination, but it's not going to be a straight path. So what is this? Well, we feel that this is an innovative pilot program. I just said nobody's done this before. So we have to innovate, we have to create, we have to build. How do you build something? Well, you have to have some knowledge in order to build it. So what we did was we actually did some research, and some of you guys were involved. We did a survey, and we got 1,822 responses back from 3 different high schools to find out what high school kids actually know about opioids. So the interesting thing is a lot of people have designed programs based on what they think other people know. We try to base this program based off what you actually know by doing some research on it. And so what do? So you combine the research with some common sense. And the common sense for us is actually to take this huge subject and to distill it down into 3 of the most important elements, the 3 must-know elements. So what do we want you guys to do? Well, in the next 3 weeks, what we want you to do is we want you to think. We want you to think outside the box. We want you to think about, well, how is this affecting me? Am I understanding this? We want you to learn. We want you to learn, and we want to learn from you. I think that's one thing that I have to impress upon everybody is we want to learn from you. And we need your voice. Your voice is really important. This is not one of these things where the adults say, oh, we want to listen to the kids, and they actually don't. We have to listen to you. We're designing this program based off students in high school. We have to talk to people in high school. And we have to figure it out, what you actually know, how you receive material, messages, is the message getting to you? How are we doing? What are we not doing well? What are we doing right? We need your input. And so once again, this is a laboratory. Like this is a test, guys. Like we're gonna make mistakes all along the way, but we're gonna learn from them. We're gonna try not to make them twice. Once again, this isn't gonna be smooth. It's gonna be it's gonna be bumpy, but we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. And so you're pioneers, remember that. This is important. This is critically important. This is not something that we just want to do. This is something that can actually save lives, literally save lives. So I want to jump in. I want to thank everybody once again for doing this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over some of the I call it housekeeping. We're going to do a little housekeeping so everybody knows what is expected of them, what they need to do, what they can expect from us too. So I want to say, let's jump in. That's actually a real picture. There's no Photoshop there. That's me jumping off that little rock, as you can see in the left. It's a sort of a photographer's way of you take it real fast shutter speed, and you can freeze it, and it looks like you're flying. Behind those mountains actually is Death Valley. So what do we, let's talk about the schedule. When I talked to everybody, I was like, okay, you got to make it on these dates. So let's just make sure that everybody understand what the dates are. It's the next 3 Tuesdays, which is including this one, and the next 3 Thursdays. August 11th, Tuesday, August 11th, Thursday, August 13th, Tuesday, August 18th, Thursday, August 20th, Tuesday, August 25th, and Thursday, August 27th. Everybody's got to know that. You got to show up. You got to be here. I was very impressed that pretty much everybody was in the waiting room by 1:45. So I want to thank you for that. We're going to do that again on Thursday also. All right. So once again, there's 3 phases to this program. We talked about it when we did the Zoom and the questionnaire. You guys will be getting awards from actually sponsored by the DEA. But you only win the awards. You only earn the awards by completing each phase. So there's 3 phases, and you got to show up. You got to show up. That's the only way to actually achieve and to be successful in each phase. You got to show up. Just like in life, you got to show up. So on the last phase, we're going to have a program on the 27th of August. Before that, we're going to schedule another Zoom call where you guys are going to take the questionnaire again that you took before, and then we're going to get your evaluation. We're going to interview you and ask you what you think about the program, what we did right, what we can improve on, what you didn't like, what we can omit. We need to get better, and we need your voice once again. And then after that, we might have like we call it a cohort focus group where we're going to get like 6, 7 to 10 of you guys get together for a quick session where you guys talk about what you thought was good, what you thought we can improve on. Sometimes it's good to hear from other people, and so we're going to do this on a team basis. How's it structured? 3 classrooms and 3 town halls. The classrooms are opioids, what we're going to talk about today. Next Tuesday, we're going to talk about naloxone. And the 3rd Tuesday, we're going to talk, we call it the paragraph, which is really research. We're going to have town halls on Tuesday. You're going to have Chris Yakum, who's the assistant special agent in charge at the DEA, talking about the evolution of the opioid epidemic. The next week, we're going to have a judge actually talking about the Good Samaritan law. How actually doing the right thing protects you more than not doing the right thing. And then in the 3rd week, we're going to have a journalist come in here and talk about research, how he goes about researching stories. It just because somebody tells you something, just because you read it on the internet, just because you see it on Instagram doesn't make it true. So how do you find out what's true and what's not true? And actually, what's your responsibility? We all have a responsibility to make sure that we're transmitting truths, not lies. So I'm going to turn it over actually now to Kaylin. I want to thank you guys for doing this again. Once again, this is going to be this is not going to be pretty all the time. Let me stop sharing this. This isn't going to be pretty all the time. And so please help us, help us get better. We really do want to hear you. So I'm going to try to transfer this over to, this is, we did it this morning, practicing. Oh, here it is. Here we go. You got it. I just made you the host.
Yep, I have it.
Okay, great.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Play from start. So thank you, Gary, for that lovely introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Kaylin, and I am a demand reduction coordinator for the Drug Enforcement Administration. If you hear bumps, I'm really sorry. I live in an apartment, and the people who live above me are honestly, I think they're luchadors. I think they're wrestlers because they make a lot of noise. So if you hear the bumps, I apologize in advance. I can't really do much about it. So as I mentioned, I'm a demand reduction coordinator for the Drug Enforcement Administration. What that means is I do the education, prevention, and outreach throughout the state, more specifically Essex County and Newark, just because that's where our office is. And so a lot of the relationships that we've built, including our relationship with Gary, are based in Newark. But we do go throughout the state. That doesn't make much of a difference to you all because from what I understand, you are all in Essex County, but we are a resource to you if you ever need us. Joanna is on the call. She used to be my colleague, but now she is a big boss down in DC, my hometown, working for our headquarters. And she put in a lot of work in this as well. And so just like Gary, I want to give her a thank you for everything that she's helped us with from getting this started and up until being a part of this now. And so, thanks, Joanna, you're the best. And here we go. So we want to begin with the article that Gary had mentioned that talks about basically, doesn't talk about, but it's basically how we arrived at this epidemic. And so to read it to you all, it is an article that was in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1980. And it says, to the editor, recently, we examined our current files to determine the incidence of narcotic addiction in 39,946 hospitalized medical patients who were monitored consecutively. Although there were 11,882 patients who received at least one narcotic preparation, there were only 4 cases of reasonably well-documented addiction in patients who had no history of addiction. The addiction was considered major in only 1 instance. The drugs implicated were mepridine in 2 patients, Percodan in 1, and hydromorphone in 1. We conclude that despite widespread use of narcotic drugs in hospitals, the development of addiction is rare in medical patients with no history of addiction. And so basically what this entry says is that from the study of 11,000 patients, there's no chance of addiction when using an opioid. We have learned that that is false, but it is what caused this epidemic. And so just to give a little pause in between, just letting you guys know how this is going to work. It'll be a PowerPoint, but we're also going to show some videos, and it'll also be interactive in some points. I don't want to talk to you or talk at you. Just like Gary said, we need you. And he told me a lot about you all, and he was bragging and bragging and bragging, and I want to see what he was bragging about. So this is me testing you with when we get into these interactive exercises. Please just bear with us, like he said. Just so you all know, I'm not a teacher. I was not trained to be a teacher, so I might have a little bumpy moments, but please just bear with me. You all are the first group that we've ever done this with, and I appreciate your participation and patience. And so now I will show you the first video once I figure out how to exit out of this slide, because I don't actually know. Can somebody talk me through this? I don't know how to exit out. There we go. All right. And we will show you the first video that is just a news article that talks about the opioid epidemic. And it's from PPS. And it's a good intro into exactly what we'll be talking about for today and over the course of the next few weeks. If you can hear it, or if you can't hear it, if somebody can just, Joanna or Gary, if you want to just send me a text to turn my volume up, and then I'll go from there.
Every day brings another story about the depth of this country's opioid crisis. Overdoses up, emergency services overwhelmed, another family bearing a loved one.
Sorry about that.
On Monday, we are starting an extensive series here on the NewsHour, broadcast and online. It's called America Addicted, and it will look at how opioids are affecting communities throughout the country, from its toll on one city in West Virginia to the rise of powerful new synthetic drugs like fentanyl in New England, and how new programs out west are trying to combat addiction. First, we wanted to take a look at exactly how this crisis began. William Brangham has that.
It's hard to grasp the full scope and scale of the opioid crisis we are in the midst of. The numbers are staggering. Almost 500,000 Americans have died in the last 15 years from an overdose, and the majority of those involve opioids. On average, 91 Americans are still dying every single day. In that same period, the rate of addiction to opioids has shot up by almost 500%, and the availability of addiction treatment has not kept up at all. So, how did we get here? Most experts say this crisis began in the 1990s when some doctors and medical associations argued that for generations, their profession had ignored the problem of chronic pain, which had caused unnecessary suffering for millions of patients. They started pushing the idea that pain be seen as the fifth vital sign, something to be checked as often as blood pressure and treated accordingly. At roughly the same time, the pharmaceutical industry, which was eager to boost sales of its new class of painkillers like OxyContin, told doctors that these new drugs could be used without fear of their patients becoming addicted. The industry even put out testimonial videos like this one from Purdue Pharma in 2000.
We doctors were wrong in thinking that opioids can't be used long term. They can be and they should be.
The industry and even some doctors also cited this one-paragraph letter posted in the New England Journal of Medicine back in 1980. Its authors had looked at the use of opioid painkillers at one burn unit in Massachusetts and wrote, quote, "The development of addiction is rare in medical patients with no history of addiction." While the authors and the New England Journal have both said that this letter was misinterpreted, it was cited hundreds of times as an endorsement for the widespread use of opioids for pain. And in fact, starting in the late 90s and early 2000s, the rate of opioid prescriptions began to snowball. By 2015, according to the CDC, enough pills were being prescribed for every American to be medicated around the clock for 3 straight weeks. But studies have now clearly shown that opioid medications can lead to dependency within just a matter of days. And so this flood of prescriptions led to a surge of addiction. And it also drove a steady rise in overdose fatalities. With these numbers growing, the medical community, local governments, and law enforcement began to take action. New prescribing guidelines were issued. Databases were created to track prescriptions.
This was a pill mill operation. Those are the allegations tonight.
And law enforcement began a crackdown on the so-called pill mills, the doctors and pharmacies that had been recklessly flooding certain communities with opioids. In 2010, prescriptions of opioids peaked and have fallen ever since. Problem solved, right? Not so fast. In 2015, there were still 3 times as many opioid prescriptions being written as there were in 1999. And many people have turned to cheaper opioid substitutes like heroin. Seizing on this booming market, drug dealers sought to boost potency and their own profits by lacing their heroin and other drugs with powerful synthetic opioids like fentanyl. Those additives have only accelerated the rise in overdose deaths, which last year killed more than 64,000 Americans. By almost any measure, this is the biggest drug epidemic in American history, dwarfing the number of lives lost to crack cocaine or methamphetamines. It's a crisis that took decades to create, and experts say will take a great deal of time, patience, and work to undo. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
Our series, America Addicted, will continue all next week.
All right, so as you all saw, obviously this is a huge issue that we're facing. And as I figure this out, I will go back into the PowerPoint. Once again, bear with me, never done this before. And play from current slide. And so the title says, what do you know about opioids? And we were gonna have this be interactive, but I think it's just a little easier just to have me speak to you all about the statistics that we're seeing. So in 2017, there are approximately 192 drug overdose deaths per day in the United States. And that number, for those who don't know, is about 70,000 deaths. 70,237 deaths, to be more specific. And so obviously that is a huge number for just 1 year, not including all of the other years that we were seeing tens of thousands of deaths. And so this is a problem that isn't going away. And just like the video said, it's a problem that's going to take some time to fix. 68% of those deaths are related to pharmaceutical opioids or heroin. And I'll get into that a little bit later about the not so differences between them. It may seem like there's a difference, but as you will see, and Gary was pretty mind blown when I showed it to him, there isn't much of a difference. About 11.1 million people indicated misusing prescription painkillers in 2017. And just so you know, misuse can mean a lot of different things. Misuse can mean you go to a friend's house and you see Vicodin in their medicine cabinet and you choose to take it. Misuse is you were given a prescription for codeine 6 months ago, it's expired, you're not supposed to use it, but you have a cough and you choose to use it anyway. Misuse doesn't always necessarily mean substance use disorder, but it means that you aren't using it in the way that your doctor intended for it to be used for either you or whoever it came from. And the last bullet point, as you can see, clearly says nearly 1 in 17 say they have used prescription medicine at least once to get high. And I think that's pretty evident. I don't really need to go much further into that. There is a picture on the right-hand side of the screen, if you all can see it. Hopefully you can. And that is actually a baseball stadium. That is Yankee Stadium. And the reason that we included it is because, at least for Gary and myself, we both agreed that visuals really help us understand the magnitude of the situation that we're dealing with, right? And so Yankee Stadium, each seat in Yankee Stadium equates to about 54,251 people in that stadium, just in seats. If you all remember, the first bullet point, I made it clear that in 2017, 70,000 people passed away from an overdose death. So imagine Yankee Stadium, every single person in that stadium passed away from a substance use disorder from an overdose, including 20,000 more. So about a little less than half of that. So imagine 1 and a little less than half of that stadium of people that died in just 1 year of opioid overdoses. It's a huge problem that we're having. It's a huge problem that we've had. I find it really important to discuss that this has always been an issue in Black and Brown communities, and I say that as an African-American woman, just out of respect to my history. And it's a problem that is continuing. It's not getting any better, but we've recognized it, and we are taking the steps to move forward. So this is where things might get a little hairy. I mentioned that I'm testing you all because I heard great things. So I want to see what you all know. So I'm gonna ask you, what is an opioid? And I'm gonna need somebody who can actually see the participants to either monitor the chat box if somebody raises their hand to answer the question. Just so we can get some responses and I can stop talking for a second and I can hear from you about what you all think. I know that you took a questionnaire from Gary and we went over those responses. And so I know a little bit of what you all think, but I want to go a little bit further. So can someone please tell me what an opioid is? And we'll give it a couple minutes. Please don't be shy. We're all friends here. If somebody answered in the chat, can Gary or Joanna, can you read it to me also, by the way?
Yep, so somebody said it is a plant, its sap can cause a high.
Okay.
Somebody else said a prescription painkiller.
Okay.
Someone else said a medication drug used as painkillers. And then there was a comment about another prescription painkiller. So that's what we have so far.
Okay. Those are all great responses. I appreciate those who were brave enough to respond. There's no wrong answer here. We're figuring this out just like you are, so please don't feel shy.
A lot of people agree with the comment about a medication prescription painkiller, and then somebody said it's a drug naturally found in opium poppy plants.
Okay, I know we all have access to a computer, but if any of you all Googled this and took away my shine, I will feel upset. Not really.
Somebody else said prescription drugs to get high, illegal or illegal. I'm not sure if you meant legal or illegal.
We get what you mean. Respond.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else? Is that all we got, Joanna?
Yeah. Somebody else said, I'm sorry, just now, an addictive substance that provides a high found in opium poppy plants can be legal or illegal.
You guys are on it. And like I said, if you Googled it, way to go for being, savvy, but we need you to give your real answers. Hopefully those are your real answers. That's it, Joanna?
That's it, yep.
Cool, thank you. And so just like you all said, opioids are drugs that come from the opium poppy plant. So way to go, guys who got it right, or our synthetic equivalents. Prescription opioids are powerful medications that relieve pain by reducing the intensity of pain signals reaching the brain. Now I'm gonna look down for a second because I have my notes here, so just bear with me. But I think these are important points to touch on, and I just wanna make sure I don't forget them. And so an opioid is a natural opioid, an alkaloid that occurs in the poppy plant. And what an alkaloid is an organic compound of a plant which have pronounced effects on a human. And so opium is the drug thank you, Joanna. So opium is the drug that is naturally occurring within the poppy plant, and it is used to create these pharmaceutical drugs that are being created in labs. And it's really important for you to understand, as a lot of you said, that there are legal and illegal equivalents of both. And someone might be prescribed an opioid, for instance, at your age. If any of you play a sport and maybe you tear a muscle or break a bone and you're in a lot of pain, your doctor may prescribe you an opioid. If you're at an age where your wisdom teeth are coming in and you need to get your wisdom teeth removed, you could be prescribed an opioid. I never had wisdom teeth, thank you God. I've heard it's awful, but it is an instance in where you might be prescribed an opioid. If you were in any serious accidents, so God forbid anyone was involved in any car accidents, you could be prescribed an opioid if you were severely injured, or any illness that causes pain, such as cancer or after surgery. Those are all instances in which a person can be legally prescribed an opioid, because just as I mentioned earlier, there are legal and illegal opioids. So this is just a chart. It might look a little confusing, but we will work through it, of what opioids are. So a natural opioid is made from the plant, and that's that alkaloid that I mentioned earlier. An alkaloid that occurs in plants such as the opium poppy, and that is what is produced from that actual plant. And an example of that is morphine or codeine. I don't know if you all listen to Future or any rapper who talks about lean. Most often when they're talking about lean, they're talking about codeine. That is the drug in which they are ingesting. And morphine is often given to those who suffer from gunshot wounds. And a type of opioid that is semi-synthetic, meaning that it is partially man-made, is an actual opioid, and that's created in labs from natural opioids. So while it is created in a lab, it also includes that alkaloid, that naturally occurring opium alkaloid within the poppy plant. And that is hydrocodone, oxycodone, meaning Vicodin or Oxycontin, as you can see at the end. And that also includes heroin. And so while hydrocodone and oxycodone, Vicodin, Oxycontin, are legal, as we all know, heroin is very much illegal. Sorry about the sound from outside of my window. Heroin is very much illegal, but it still is an opioid. And something that is fully synthetic, meaning that it is man-made and nothing natural is from it, it's created in a lab, is fentanyl. And we'll talk about fentanyl a little later. It is 50 to 100 times more powerful than any opioid, and it is incredibly dangerous and incredibly terrifying. And as you can see from the bottom, we thought it was important to show you the chemical compound of what heroin looks like and Vicodin and Oxycontin. So as we know, heroin is illegal, hydrocodone, Vicodin, and Oxycontin are, sorry, thank you, Gary, for your time check. Oxycodone and Oxycontin are both legal. And as you can see, they look essentially the same. There's not much of a difference between them. And that is why the switch from a person who may be addicted to Vicodin or Oxycontin can so easily make that transition into heroin because of how similar they are in chemical components. The only difference is one is completely illegal and it's made by a drug dealer who has no idea what he's putting in it, and you may not even get what you think you're getting. It's faster acting and it's stronger and it's that much more dangerous. Oops. Uh-oh. There we go.
Kaylin, can you just go back to that other slide?
I can do that for you.
Okay, so guys, we're going to show you a couple things along the next 3 weeks. There's a few things that are critical. Remember what the chemical composition of heroin and hydrocodone and oxycodone is. I would gamble with anybody here that they couldn't tell the difference if you just looked at this picture. So you're going to hear that it's the same. Taking Oxycontin is the same as taking heroin, fentanyl, and all this other stuff. The reason it's the same because it almost is exactly the same. So keep that in mind when we talk to you about fentanyl and other stuff like that. It's all the same. I say same game, different uniform. That's all it is.
All
so
right.
That's just wanted to interject that.
No worries. And so we can move through this pretty fast because we only have about 30 minutes left and we want to make sure we get through the presentation. Not too many slides left, so don't worry about that. But who is brave enough to give me a description of what they think someone who is addicted to opioids or just any drug may look like? Are there certain features and how could you tell? And so I'll be the first brave soul. Before I really became educated, I thought of somebody who was probably homeless, who maybe had this wild look in their eye. Their hair might have been a little crazy. We hear all the time of people who have picks at their skin. Amber, raise your hand. You can unmute yourself. And then you can go next.
A person who's addicted to opioids could look like anything. It doesn't really have like a set look. Like they could be the richest person, the most cleanest person. Like you never really know.
Oh, girl. And Ara, you raised your hand if you want to go next. I'm really sorry if I said your name wrong.
It's okay. You can just call me Ara. Basically what she said, but I wanted to add on that the person is like mostly sleepy. Mm-hmm. Like you can see symptoms of them being sleepy a lot. So yeah.
You're exactly right. It slows down your brain functions and it makes you tired. Joanna, can you tell me if there's anything in the chat, or Gary?
On the chat, we got a description of somebody who might have an odd behavior pattern, sleeping a lot, and them not eating right.
Okay, those are all completely true. So
yep.
Way to go, guys. You guys were way less stigmatizing than I am, so good for you. Be better than me. Anything else, Joanna, or can we move through?
That's it. You can move through, yep.
And so it's really important to understand your risk factors. Gary and I were actually having this conversation a couple of days ago when we got a little personal because risk factors can look very different for other people. And so just to list a few, risk factors can be family history, starting to use at a young age, mental health struggles, or hanging around people who use drugs. The last one isn't necessarily a determinant, but I was told by my mom a lot growing up, and even just a few days ago, that you are the company you keep. And so while it might, it's not necessarily a factor, it can contribute to you maybe wanting to try what the people who you are hanging around do. Family history, obviously, if you have a history of someone who suffers from a substance use disorder, your chance of having a substance use disorder yourself is very high. I know for myself, I have a long history of substance use disorder, crack use, crack addiction, alcoholism, depression, anxiety. And so all of those for me are risk factors, and it makes me very careful when I'm prescribed anything, or even I'm 26, so this is legal, even when I drink with my friends. These are all things that I really pay attention to because I know that I have a higher risk than the next person to becoming addicted. And so it's really important that you understand that within yourself. And you don't obviously have to share it with anybody, but just knowing that for you, so that way you can take care of yourself in the way that you need to, so you don't run into this issue in the future. Yeah. So here we go with the science. I'm not a science teacher, but I am trying. Okay, so as you can see, there are two images of brains, and you can notice that they look a little different. And so this is actually to discuss just how your brain responds when it is given an opioid. Opioids sort of mess with the way your brain sends and receives messages to the part of your body. An opioid is meant to block pain. That is the whole purpose of it. That's why it's given to you during surgery. That's why it's given to you if you break a bone. It's so you do not feel that pain. And that's obviously messing with the messages that your brain is trying to send because you are in pain. And so you can see in the top picture, that is a brain that is functioning normally, and that is a brain that is sending and receiving messages the way that it should. And in the bottom picture, that brain has been affected by some sort of substance, and it is affecting how it is receiving and sending messages. Gary, do you think we have enough time for this video, or do you want to move on? It's only 4 minutes.
I think we should just, you should finish up. We should just get to the fentanyl one.
The fentanyl, you want to just do that one?
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time to go. You covered it already, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. Show.
Okay, yep. So this is just an image of neurons. Obviously, we know what neurons are. They are in your body. They are where messages are sent and received, and how your brain receives them and sends them. And so you notice that the two neurons, so this neuron and this neuron, aren't touching each other. And that's because your brain is sending messages through those gaps called a synaptic gap. And that is where the message of, we're talking about opioids, so pain, when you feel good, so the feeling of pleasure, that is how it's sent through your body. And the synaptic gap is where our body has receptors to transfer messages all throughout the body. I apologize for looking down. Those are my notes. Sorry for talking fast. I just want to get through it. I don't want to run out of time. Oops. Oh gosh. So we all hear the buzzing? Yes. The buzzing is annoying, I know, but it's to get your attention. All right. And so you heard a buzzing, and I don't know about for you all, but for me, when I hear buzzing, the first thing I instinctively do is look around and kind of swap my arms and more than likely run, just because I hate bugs. More specifically, I hate bugs that sting or bite, and that is the way my brain processes that sound. So the message that my brain is sending my body is to frantically run and flee away from the buzzing sound. And although that message looks different in everybody's brain, because everybody's brain reacts differently, we all process messages the same way. Your brain hears something, it processes what it is, and it tells your body what it needs to do in response to that sound. And that's something that is important to understand, because when you take an opioid sort of muddies that, right? And so it makes your messaging that goes to and from your brain not really do what they're supposed to do, because what the opioid does, as I mentioned before, is it blocks that pain. And so, you can't really trust the messages that your brain is telling your body when you're on a different substance, just because it's altering your chemistry. And this is just another example of how, messages are sent and received, the transmitter and receptor. I'm just going to kind of blow through this as well, because like I mentioned, it's just all about how messages are received to the brain and how brain cells communicate. All right. And so dopamine is a neurotransmitter, meaning that it affects the body. It's sort of like the feel-good hormone. And how it is affected by opioids is it enhances and increases neurotransmitters released in the reward pathway. And the function that is affected is pleasure and reward, movement, attention, and memory. And so what that basically means is dopamine is what makes you feel good. If you eat candy and you're like, oh my gosh, I want more candy, that's because your body is releasing dopamine and it's saying, give me the good stuff, give me the goods. And it keeps wanting that good thing. And until you give it to it, you might keep hearing it. The way opioids affects that is it sort of stops that natural production. And so instead of your brain craving that dopamine, that natural opioid, you can call it, in your brain, it craves that opioid. And that is how a person can become addicted, because they keep craving that thing that makes it feel good. Endogenous opioids, and it's affected by opioids because it reduces excitability of neurons and creates the euphoric effects. So that's the thing that makes you feel good. It sort of calms you down. And unfortunately, the way overdoses happen is it calms you down so much to the point where a person's brain can actually tell them to stop breathing, because it affects your brain function and it affects those messages that we talked about within the brain. Oops, sorry, still figuring this out, guys. And what that moderates is hunger, thirst, and pain reactions, also involved in mood control. The GABA acid reduces how it's affected by opioids. It reduces its ability to stop the amount of dopamine produced. And so, like I mentioned before, the opioid stops that feel-good hormone that your body naturally creates. And so if it's not getting it naturally, obviously the next step here is that it craves that unnatural chemical that you gave it, and that is what causes that substance use. And that slows neuron activity to reduce anxiety. So the adolescent brain. I don't know about you all, but when I was your age, I thought I knew everything. No one could tell me anything, and I was the smartest person in the room. And I knew everything. And I know I said that already. But as you can see from the UCLA School of Medicine image that we have right here, I'm circling it, your brain is still developing. And so just to read through the bullet points, brains are still developing during adolescence. Our brain develops from back to front. The prefrontal cortex does not fully mature until about the age of 25, and development of the adolescent brain and behavior are closely linked. And so just to put it into a bit of perspective for you all, I just turned 26 on August 1st. And basically my brain just last year finally stopped developing. And some of you all may already know this information. And so if you give your brain something that alters the way it thinks, it actually alters the way your brain is developing. And in some cases can actually slow that development down, which can cause some issues further down the line. And so it's really important that you understand this, because as I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, the earlier you start using a substance, the more the likelihood is of you becoming addicted to that substance or something stronger, because we'll get into tolerance and your tolerance level, and I think the next slide actually. And so just to repeat myself, give your brain a substance too early, and it affects the way your brain develops. And it's clear from the image that we have from the UCLA School of Medicine. Are there any questions in the chat box also, or does anyone have any questions that I hopefully will be able to answer?
I don't see any in the chat box right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Joanna. Oh, good Lord. All right, so this slide, we're talking about tolerance and dependence. So tolerance occurs as more of a substance is needed to produce the same effect as the first time it is taken. And so basically what that means is the more that you take something, the higher tolerance that you'll have. And so the one thing you'll hear from a lot of people who are in recovery is that they were always trying to chase that first high, right? And there's nothing like that first high, because it's the first time you ever gave your body that substance, And there's nothing like that feeling, and you will never have that feeling again. But people will start to use a higher and higher or a stronger and stronger dose of whatever it is that they're using, because their body has become more tolerant to it, and it needs more of it to have a similar effect to the first time that it was taken, even though they can tell you themselves there was nothing like the first time, essentially. And dependence occurs as removal of the substance causes negative physical effects to the body. And so what that means is a person who decided that they wanted to get sober, their body was dependent on it. And now that it's no longer receiving that thing that makes it feel good, their body is reacting negatively. So they'll sleep for hours and hours on end. As you can see on the bullet point, they can feel sick. They'll be vomiting, they feel achy, they just do not feel good. And that generally lasts a few days as the body rids itself of that negative thing that they had been putting in it for so long. And it's important to understand that unfortunately, a lot of people who are in recovery who went through their sober period or their detoxing might become a bit depressed because their body hasn't had to naturally create that dopamine or that feel-good hormone that it was not used to creating, right? And so it was getting something that was making them feel good for so long that it basically just stopped producing its own feel-good hormone because it didn't have to. And so, it takes a bit of time for your body sorry, I just got a text. So it takes a bit of time for your body to start creating that dopamine hormone again. And so you'll hear a lot of people say that they don't feel good. And yeah, that is the difference between tolerance and dependence.
We have a question. Can opioids cause Alzheimer's? Which is a little difficult question. So we could come back to you on that one and do some research, okay?
Yeah, we're not sure. That is actually an excellent question that I have no idea. So I'm actually going to write that down.
Thank you for that question, because it's a really great question.
And we'll make sure we get the answer to you by the next session.
Yep.
And so just the key takeaways are, an opioid is a drug that comes from the poppy plant. Anyone can become addicted to opioids, and it's imperative to understand your risk factors. And so I think another thing before we get into the last video that'll kind of be a prelude to Thursday is that if a person is addicted to a substance and they are going to any dealer on the street, they have no idea what they're getting. And so we really want to hone in on this one pill can kill idea, and we make it rhyme just because it kind of sticks a little better, because you have no idea what you're getting. Unfortunately, the drug trade is all about economics. They do not care about you. They don't care about if you live or die. They just want to make their money. And so it's much cheaper to give someone a fentanyl pill to the dealer than it is to the user. And so we want to make sure that you all understand that this is an epidemic that was caused essentially by economics, and understanding that you can sort of protect yourself with that understanding, and obviously understanding your risk factors. And so the reason I bring that up is because the last video I'm going to show you is a video that talks about fentanyl, and that drug is 50 to 100 times more potent than an opioid, and it is killing tens of thousands of people. And it is what will be discussed on Thursday and into next week. And so we will get that video once I figure out how to exit out. There we go.
Represents 10 people. And this dot represents 100 people. In 2015, this many died from gun violence in America. This many died in car crashes. Even more Americans died from a drug overdose. 52,000 people. That's more people than there are seats at Yankee Stadium. More people are dying because of the opioid epidemic, a public health crisis that is causing waves of progressive drug use. First, Americans got hooked on prescription painkillers. Next, addicted users moved on to more potent drugs, like heroin. Now, an increasing number of Americans are overdosing on an even more powerful opioid.
Fentanyl is taking the opioid epidemic to a new level. Fentanyl more potent than heroin.
Another drug is surging.
Fentanyl so potent you could die with the syringe still in your arm.
The explanation for the rise of fentanyl begins in the late 1990s.
Since I've been on this new pain medication, I have not missed one day of work, and my boss really appreciates that. Lauren is there every day.
That's when pharmaceutical companies began advertising new opioids that were supposedly non-addictive.
But these are the same drugs that have a reputation for causing addiction and other terrible things. They do not have serious medical side effects. And so these drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
American doctors started prescribing opioids like Oxycontin, Percocet, and Vicodin at record numbers, and overdoses began spiking. In the 2000s, the government took steps to limit the supply of prescription pills. Pharmaceutical manufacturers were sued for falsely marketing their products as non-addictive. Doctors were prosecuted for overprescribing pain pills, and authorities tightened limits on painkillers. By 2013, prescription drug abuse leveled off as pills became harder to find. But that didn't help Americans who were already hooked. When addicts couldn't get pills, they found more dangerous drugs. Many started using heroin, an extremely potent opioid that is made from the sap of the opium poppy. It's this transition that has led the opioid crisis to epidemic proportions. The Center for Disease Control found that people addicted to prescription painkillers are 40 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. Heroin is more potent than prescription pain pills, and therefore more lethal. Soon, heroin overdoses began skyrocketing. And as usage became widespread, users with a high tolerance for heroin began seeking even stronger opioids. And that's part of what led to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is more powerful and cheaper to make than heroin. Unlike heroin, fentanyl can easily be made in a lab. It was first developed as an anesthetic for surgeries in the 1960s and later found use as a treatment for chronic pain in the 1990s. Since then, it continues to be approved for restricted medical use and is prescribed for advanced cancer patients. In regulated medical settings, fentanyl is often delivered by injection or as a patch or lozenge, forms which allow the drug to be released gradually. Similar to other opioids like morphine and heroin, fentanyl sedates the user by reacting with receptors in the brain to release dopamine. But fentanyl is about 100 times more potent than morphine. Drug traffickers have been using it to cut heroin to increase the potency and profits from their product. So heroin addicts can consume fentanyl unknowingly, which increases the chances of an accidental overdose. Exposure to the drug is so dangerous that the CDC requires first responders to wear protective gear when fentanyl is suspected at a scene.
It's a scary
In
situation.
Ohio, an unprotected police officer accidentally overdosed after particles of fentanyl settled on his clothing during a traffic stop.
That he just accidentally bumped up against something while he was searching his vehicle, and for him to drop out like that, it's shocking.
3 years after heroin deaths began to spike, fentanyl overdoses began rising. Already, new opioids are fulfilling the next iteration of this progression. Carfentanil, an opioid used as an elephant tranquilizer, is a growing cause of overdoses in the United States. This photo compares a potentially lethal dose of all three drugs, showing that it could take just a few grains of carfentanil to kill someone. The fact that cracking down on prescription painkillers has pushed users to even more dangerous opioids demonstrates the need for better drug policies. In addition to targeting the supply of drugs, providing better treatment options for addiction will reduce the demand for them. In 2016, preliminary estimates of Americans that died by drug overdose are as high as 65,000 people. Experts estimate 2017 will be even worse. As long as people are addicted, they're going to find ways to satisfy that addiction, even if it means using more dangerous drugs like fentanyl.
All right, so as you all saw, fentanyl is incredibly dangerous. To me, it's absolutely terrifying. I had emergency surgery a couple weeks ago, and they told me they were giving me fentanyl. And I freaked out because I didn't want to be given fentanyl. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more on Thursday. As Gary mentioned earlier, our boss, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Chris Defer Yakum, will be speaking a little bit about the opioid epidemic, and he will be getting into the impact that fentanyl has had on it. So, Gary, would you like to?
Can you host me back? Well,
I
can do that, right? How do I do that?
So we just have some clarification for the chat. Opium is what is found in the flower, and opioid is the actual man-made drug, correct?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, yep, so that's the clarification. And then somebody asked, opium is in opioids, but I don't know if that was a question. It gets a little confusing with all the terms.
It does. So you guys may have heard me mention alkaloid, and that is what's naturally occurring in the poppy plant. Alkaloid is something that causes basically a human to function differently. And the alkaloid that is within the poppy plant is opium. Opium is used to make opioids. So when we say it's semi-synthetic, it has that natural component of the opium that's in the poppy plant, but it's created in a lab and is basically turned into an opioid. If that doesn't help, I can try to break it down a little bit more simply, but just let me know and we will work it out.
Okay. Do I have the host back?
Yes, you do.
I think I do. All right. Just wanted to thank everybody for doing this and coming today. We're gonna close it out. It's right at 3 o'clock. I promised you guys that we do this for an hour. So please be in the waiting room again at 1:45 on Thursday. We appreciate everybody doing this. Thank you very much. If you have any suggestions for what you think we should do, what we don't do, we want to hear it. Your voice, once again, is necessary and needed. And 3 things, right? What is an opioid? 1 pill can kill, and the Good Samaritan law. Don't forget that. All right. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. We're going to leave you with that. And I want to thank everybody for coming, and we'll see you on Thursday. All right.
Thanks, guys. And thank you for those who answered questions. You're the best.
Bye, guys. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thanks for the waves there.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
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 Gary, I'm going to stay on if you want to talk, but there's also a worm on my floor, so I'm going to.
Oh, wow.
Right? I live in friggin'.
So we're going to, actually,